Well, good evening, everybody. And it's so good to have you all back with us at the Marketplace Forum. Monday evenings, those of you that are tracking with us realize that we're a little bit out of sync because we normally do the first and the third Monday of every month. But this is a very special month, and it's Women's Month. It's where we celebrate women. And we've been on a very, very exciting series where we've been looking at tackling some of the stereotypes of women in business. And it again is such an honor for me to have some amazing women with me again this evening. 3 of the 4 that were with us last week. Annie, Zarina, Yvette, so good to have you guys back with us.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
So if you weren't with us last week, let me give you a very quick introduction about what we're doing. We're looking at stereotypes, and we're trying to break these stereotypes. We're trying to look at them from three different perspectives. The first one last week, we looked at it from a theological perspective, as how to break some of these theological stereotypes, things that as Christians, we sometimes just think, well, that's the way it is, and we think it's in the Bible somewhere. And really, a lot of the stuff we think's there is actually not there. It's being passed down through culture, tradition, but actually doesn't really exist in the Bible the way we think it does. And we're not going to repeat all of that, but it's there that you'll be able to tap into that from last week. Tonight, we're going to move on and we're going to start looking at societal stereotypes, and we're going to look at unconscious bias. And next week, we're going to tackle the real big one, and that's sexual harassment in the marketplace, in the workplace. And so we're going to be building this up slowly. So hang on to your seats because it's going to be a good ride. So by means of a very quick introduction again, Zarina is a legal and governance consultant. She's a director of a company called Baruch Legal, and she provides legal and governance advice to both the public and the private sector. She has practiced as a partner in one of the top tier law firms in South Africa. She has served as a general counsel to an SOE, and she's been an advisor to a cabinet minister. She's also an elder in the Every Nation Ramshoek Church and heads up their prophetic ministry. Zarina, so good to have you back with us this evening. Then Annie McWalter is the CEO of not one, but 2 companies, the Psycha Enterprise Development Company and the Hope Factory, which is a nonprofit. Both of these serve in the SMME ecosystem and the space of SMMEs. Both of these companies are owned by Psycha, which is the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. And she loves prophetic, she loves worship, she loves leading connect groups. She is a powerful woman, and she loves bringing the kingdom of God into every place where she has the ability to influence. And then last, but definitely not least, Dr. Yvette Solomons. I've known Dr. Yvette for, I don't know, Yvette must be 20, 30 years now. I love her. I love her entire family. She is a prosthodontist, one of our country's leading prosthodontists. If you don't know what that is a very, very specialized dentist, very specialized, all right? And she serves in both academia and in the private sector. She's married to an amazing man his name is Dean, and it's Dean's birthday today. So Dean, if you're watching your amazing wife this evening, thank you for releasing her to us tonight. And she is the mother of 2 adult boys. Once again, thank you, Charles. Thank you, Sam, on the back end. And we're going to not waste too much more time. We're going to climb into it right away. Ladies, last week, we tackled some theological myths. We looked at theological myths as they relate to leadership, as they relate to submission, as they relate to different roles. And Yvette, I'd like to start with you this evening. You know, one of the risks when one tackles topics like this, you know, in the forum that we're tackling it, is that sometimes people hear a lot more than what you're trying to say. And I wanted to just reflect. I'm wondering if you could just reflect on us what some of these risks are, that when you deal with theological myths that people then sometimes hear or sometimes feel, which are actually what we're not saying at all.
Thank you, Dorian. I think it's also in response to some discussions had with some ladies, because what happens with stereotyping is that you begin to accept it as normal. And what happens with stereotype, of course, it says, our topic tonight is that we wanted to dismantle the stereotypes. And it obviously is an oversimplified conception. Somebody puts you in a box, and that's where you're going to stay for the rest of your life. And it is uncomfortable because we are starting conversations that causes discomfort. It causes discomfort for the ones who have been victims. It causes discomfort for the ones who have been the people who have erased, who have victimized others. And what happens is that we get erroneous world beliefs and world views. And if we don't address those as errors, that speaks against what God originally designed. As we did last week, we really unpacked God's design, what God designed us to be, the co-partnership, the co-leadership, participating, and we are not disavowing gender. We are not I want to emphasize that this is not about going against what God has instructed us. Our godly mandate stands. Nothing can interfere with that. This is not a fight. It is not a women liberation movement, even though the women's lib movement facilitate mass changes in the past as such. But this is a time where we as a church, as a people of God, a people of light, are coming in and we are owning our discomforts. And we are wanting to bring kingdom principle into that and say, God, what did you originally intend? Because the fact is that in the workplace, there may be some that are comfortable. Maybe you're not suffering. Maybe you are not being devalued or disregarded. But that does not negate the fact that abuse, devaluing, disregard is real in the world out there. Why? Because we live in a fallen world. So what are we doing? We want to bring kingdom into it. And of course, we want to address those erroneous beliefs so that when you get a better worldview and you get God's light shining into it, you will no longer be discipling in an erroneous way. And we want to be able to pave the way for the future. For the future, we actually rewriting the narrative so that when the future women step in, wow, there is now, okay, it is now time that people come in. They own their discomforts, they speak about it, they speak up and come in and say, God, I need you in this. And that is what it's all about. So if maybe some of our people feel a little bit left out because you feel, oh, wow, I'm losing something and these people are just putting up a fight, it's not that. We're just wanting to bring kingdom in and speaking reality. Our current reality is not God's design. And that is really what we want to, in actual fact, navigate through. Thank you, Dorian.
Amen, Yvette. And it is uncomfortable when we're navigating change. It is uncomfortable when you're learning new things. And it's great to hear that that people can be who they feel God's called them to be. But yet at the same time, we can all be saying, God, how do we get closer and closer to your kingdom view of what this is meant to look like? Annie, some of the feedback last week was amazing. And clearly, this is a topic that needs to be discussed, and which is why we're putting a 3-week series together, not just a 1-week series. But one of the things that came out quite clearly was, guys, please, let's not make a big song and dance of this in August and then forget about it for the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. What can we do as the church, as the body of believers, to make sure that we keep this flag flying, but not become lopsided, that this becomes the only thing that we're about?
Yeah, I think so. This month and the church series has also made us aware of certain things around women, around in Every Nation Rosebank, we've been speaking quite a bit about gender-based violence, and we've really been kind of dismantling some of the myths around that. But I think for us to actually continue is that don't wait for the church to kind of grow you in this area. There's nothing stopping you from now continuing, now that you've become aware, to grow, to learn, to research yourself, to actually take like interest, and men in the workplace, there'll be one or two women that you are able to have a kind of a deep, honest conversation about. How do I come across? Do I treat women well? We've spoken about examples of in some of our planning for the session, where Jolly had an instance where wherever she spoke something in a particular in a grouping, they would never listen to what she was saying, but then she had an ally, and that gentleman did speak it up. But what would have been better for him, and I think we referred to it last week, would be to say, guys, why aren't we listening to Jolly when she says it? How come you're only listening when I'm saying it as a man? So I think it's for us to continue on this journey, and it is a journey of growing in our awareness and actually becoming more curious. I think curiosity is really important, and for us to listen to actually find out, what is your story? How is it for you in the workplace? To be more conscious of it, and to continue in our growth of consciousness and becoming more adept in terms of dealing with these various issues. And I think the second week of unconscious bias, you'll see more things that are possibly there that you can become aware of, that you can now continue to grow in this journey of.
Thank you, Annie. I think those are some great suggestions that I think all of us can take to heart and reflect on. Zarina, now transitioning into this week's topic, which is dealing with the stereotype of unconscious bias. I guess it probably begs the question, what is unconscious bias, and how does it develop?
Thank you, Dorian. So in essence, what an unconscious bias is it's an unintentional bias that we have as human beings. It can relate to anything. It can relate to race. It can relate to socioeconomic status. But obviously tonight we're looking at unconscious bias as it relates to gender. And it's usually an unintentional, we're usually unaware of this bias that we have, of the assumptions that we have, of the stereotypes that we have of other people. And why it's so dangerous is that it affects not only how we see other people, but also how we treat other people. So some silly examples of what an unintentional bias could be, or I guess would be something around, I'm going to throw out some silly examples. So, men are better drivers than women, or women are better drivers than men. You throw like a girl. We often hear people say that. We often hear people say, when a female commentator comes on during a sports game, we often hear men say, oh, what does she know about sport? So those are some of the things that, again, unintentionally and being unaware of some of the biases or assumptions that we hold about people. And our unintentional biases, or unconscious biases, they stem from childhood, they stem from our cultures, they stem from traditions. They can be shaped by our peers, so the people that we spend our time with, but also around, a lot of the time it stems from media. So that in essence is what unconscious bias is.
Thank you, Zarina. And I think it's, some people might go, well, what's the big deal? Because maybe it doesn't matter to me, but it is a big deal for the person that it does matter to, or that person that does feel hurt by what you're saying. And that's why we all need to become so aware of these unintentional, unconscious bias. So let's tackle the first one this evening. As we were preparing for this, we identified 3 in total. And the first one we identified is this unconscious bias that, are there certain roles in the marketplace that men, or alternatively women, are just universally better at because of the genetic differences that clearly exist? So are there certain things that just men are better at and women just are better at? And if they are, what are they? Zarina.
Darren, let me start off by saying that we do tend to have these unconscious ideas or biases around men being better in certain careers or in certain professions. So things, for example, around STEM cycles, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Men making better lawyers, for example, men making better doctors. And we also hold the view sometimes that women, for example, make better teachers, they make better nurses, they do better, for example, in areas like design and marketing. And, I actually just want to raise and make a point around an article that was written not so long ago, so fairly recently, 2018, 2019, but a fairly prominent CEO. And after writing this article, he came under serious fire from a number of women's organizations and was in fact fired because of the article that he wrote. But he made two statements, and from these two statements, I really want to raise 3 points. And then I'll open it up to Yvette and Annie just to make some comments around this. But he said this, he wrote that more men occupy high-profile executive positions because of appetite for workload and extreme performance requirements at that level. And then he said, the reason why women do not occupy these positions is that women choose to rather have the flexibility to dedicate themselves to more important enterprises like family and raising children than to be at the beck and call of shareholders. And so really from those two statements, they're three things that I really want to raise, because in essence, what he's saying, or what I'm hearing him saying, whether overtly or subtly, is the following. He's saying that women are really less intellectually capable and or able to deal with certain professions and certain leadership roles. He's saying that, women are either less physically able, so, are they of lesser strength and or stamina to handle certain roles? And then he's saying that women are predisposed to caregiving roles. So, what I want to say around this is, let's start off with the one around intellect. I don't know that there's anything in the Bible that says that women are intellectually inferior to men. We dealt with some of the biblical scriptures last week, which spoke specifically to women being given equal and joint rulership of the earth. So I can't see any reason why women should and or can be seen to be intellectually inferior. And again, for me, is it a matter of gender or is there something else at play? So that's the first statement I want to make around that. The question on whether or not women are physically less capable than men, that's something we can debate. And I know it's a bias that a lot of people hold. And I know that there are people listening who believe that women are. And, women may not necessarily have the same physical structure to men. But again, I'm going to talk about a little clip that Jolly gave us last week in the group. She posted a picture of her physical trainer. And I can tell you, there are a lot of men who wouldn't stand up to that physical strength. So again, is it a matter of a general gender generalization? Are we making generalizations from that perspective? And the same can be said again for, are women predisposed to caregiving roles? Are women expected to be the primary caregivers? Is it a matter of being a primary caregiver, or is it a matter of being a caregiver? And I mean, we can talk through that. So those are just the 3 points I want to make. And I think the 3 areas where I really feel like we need to dig deep, not just as women, but also as men. And you know what, if it is so that women are physically less able than men, then let's own up to that. I guess that's really where I'm coming from. So I'd like to open it up now, maybe Yvette and Annie, if you want to maybe say something about it, add an example, some kind of a testimony around this.
Thank you, Zarina. Just on the 20th of August, there was an article in the Mail and Guardian, and it was written by Bongikile Matupe. And the title of the article was Few Women Leaders in Academia. And the point is made that there's no shortage of women with skills to lead the universities, but the fact is that they are not ascending to leadership positions. And the Commission for Gender Equality And HRSA is the Higher Education Resources Services. They did, since they presented some statistics, and out of the 26 universities, there are only 4 vice chancellors that are female. And so the question is why? And we get an answer from Thabo Mbeki, African Leadership Institute acting head. She's Dr. Edith Pashwana, and she says, women are made to feel that they should just be grateful to be in the higher education sector. They should not expect more. So the disparities, according to race and gender, continues at the universities. And it has to be said that in terms of workload, the women pay a high price for unrewarded, unappreciated academic citizenship. It is almost that it is expected from them, because only 12 out of 30 are deputy vice chancellors, despite sufficient capacity and talent. Only 30% of professors are female. And you have to ask it, for some of us who are in academia, you have to say, wow, you're going to spend the rest of your life there and never ascend to a position that you might be able to do so. And one of them stated the fact that it says it's probably not surprising for a country that is built on the bedrock of racism and patriarchy. So because of that, they find that there are entrenched institutional patriarchal cultures, and that is the reason. So they sideline women, they silence them by not valuing their input and their concern. There's bullying. Women are not prepared for leadership positions. That is always the debate and the argument. And so they talk about disabling politics. It is about disabling politics because of this disregard, because of this discomfort that they don't want to own. They want to continue with the erroneous beliefs. And so there has been several ministerial reports to deal with gender transformation, for example, but there's no political will to deal with it. And they come, and it started in 2008 already. There are many voices, many documents, many task teams. The issue is the implementation. It means that the people who have ownership of it have not essentially had a change of mindsets. And so therefore, conversations like this is important, because we may ask that the ministry must now execute powers that are given by legislation. They've been given the powers, and we need to get and encourage that the summits that they frequently have must begin to speak to address the snail space. We call it snail space, so that the institutional racism and sexism and the alienating environment for women. I personally, I've been there for many years. I have acquired the necessary qualifications, and every time I am overlooked, because maybe in the previous dispensation, I had a different color, and now they make it a color issue. But in essence, every time there is always a male that is promoted ahead of you. And it's not because you do not have the talent, so to speak. That is the example and my own personal testimony that I can specifically speak into what you were speaking about, Zarina.
I think just to add very shortly is that it's very interesting to watch Rwanda as a kind of a case study, where actually it's a good news story coming from tragedy, where there was the genocide, and a number of men, unfortunately, they were killed, also women and children. But you've seen in that nation that they have had the political will from the top and have made more positions available for women in parliaments, in governments, and you're also seeing women going into non-traditional roles where they didn't have men in those places. They unfortunately had passed with the genocide, and you see women going into all these different areas, and it's a very interesting kind of feature to see, is that actually they are obliterating that whole thing of what a man can do, what a woman can do, and roles in society. So that's kind of like such an interesting example for you to see. But I do also think that the more that women see other women there, in a particular area, the more they will likely go into that area. Just a very small example, it was just so stunning to see on online church when Pastor Lindy was preaching, and, you know, Rory, her daughter, was just like, preach it, mum, you know, and so that's actually what it takes for things to become, you know, changed, is that you actually see examples of women actually being in those positions, and then it allows other women, future generations, it's normal for them, for them to see women preaching, women leading, etc.
Ladies, thank you. I know this is a challenging bias, and just reflecting, just listening to the three of you and reflecting, Zarina, I agree. There's certainly nothing biblically about intellect when it comes to men and women. In fact, there's nothing scientifically different. And so that one we can put to bed immediately. Physical strength, okay, I think we all admit men on average have greater physical strength than women. But then I wonder how many jobs nowadays actually require brute physical strength, and that is the actual reason that men are biased against women. And I can't think of too many. But maybe there is a case for that. But even having said that, if we have a system that makes it even harder for women to apply for certain jobs that they choose to want to try out, even if it means that they're at a physical disadvantage, for what gives us the right to make it harder for women to apply for something that is in their heart to pursue? And so I think you've highlighted just the difficulties that I think are so critical for us all, both men and women, to be aware of, so that we can try and not repeat these same mistakes going forward. A second one that I would like to kind of move into then, ladies, and we're running a little behind, but that's okay. You know, let's do this properly rather than try and rush it. Is, do women earn less than men? We hear this all the time. And I'm wondering, is there any data out there that demonstrates that women earn less than men? And if they do, how much less than men? And, you know, is it just because men are preferred over women? I mean, Yvette, maybe you can kick this off for us. I think you're on mute there, Yvette.
Sorry, better? Is that better?
All good.
All that in the technology. Yeah, I always go and I like to find evidence and to prove things so that you can get facts without just speaking something and have your own biases, so to speak. And of course, the issue around earning capacity, there's been debates and arguments around it that it is not actually a women issue. It is a community or society issue. And also for lower earning jobs, the gap between the income is in actual fact smaller. So when it comes to really the workplace as such, is that I think in the Rwandan example, for example, the example that Annie spoke about, is that paying women well is the most critical factor in erasing poverty. That's what, there is evidence, it is evidence-based. And of course, there was almost a Netflix tape, a recording on the 17th of April. I think you were one of the people that shared that with us as well, where Hillary Clinton and Anne-Marie Slaughter discussed cultural norms at the center of the gender pay gap. And definitely there are cultural issues involved, societal issues involved, because there are examples where you may have found women that has gone in to negotiate, to say, this is my workload, this is my output, and I should be earning commensurate with the work that I do. And she's been able to negotiate that. And it brought up the argument that men may be aggressive negotiators, much more aggressive. So they are powerful persuaders. Sometimes women are probably not as confident, etc. And so therefore, sometimes they, well, you know what, it's okay. As long as I am here, I'm working, I'm happy at what I can do. And sometimes they exchange that. It is a choice. They exchange it for time to spend with their family. So what we do find is that there is a penalty, almost kind of what we call a motherhood penalty, that they pay. It's not that the workplace would probably pay them less, but it's because of their choice. They make those work choices. And they take us back to years back. And some of you are younger than what I am. Years back, women didn't work. Some of our grandmothers never worked. And of course, women didn't go to college. They were then assigned to very menial jobs, factory assembly lines, or repetitive work for that matter. And of course, came in the assumptions that they're good at their work that requires dexterity. And so careers were for men. And to take care of the housework, take care of the children, women are better at that. We speak again about the stereotypes. And besides, discrimination was legal at that particular time. The choices were made for you. You couldn't come out and say, well, I wanted to be a doctor. Okay, I mean, I remember in 1981 when I applied I first applied for medicine, and then I got into dentistry, and we were 5 women in a class of 46. So over the years, the whole ratio changed as such. Okay, you could not become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer if you wanted to, if you were a female. And of course, the paybacks of the pay gaps was then, of course, and the cultural norms definitely had an influence according to what they have presented. So the women in the workplace and the workforce now are in bigger numbers. We're in a different era and a different time. And of course, the expectations still remain that women will still do double the work. You will be assigned to your prominent work, but when you come home, you are going to carry the brunt of the housework. So, and then of course, what happens, you would then commensurate with that, decide maybe I should take a lower pay as such. And they followed the trajectories of law students and they looked to see what happened to them. And it's very interesting to note that when they got to their 30s as such, they then obviously they decided, well, you know, I'm going to stay at home. And what happens? Hubby goes to work and he gets the promotion. And so you have this time out of work where she's 8 to 10 years of childbearing that she's not working and she's not visible. She does not get promotion. And so I don't think it's a gender issue related to the earning capacity. It used to be. But now there are many other factors. I would say in a nutshell, there is context. One has to take context into consideration. Thank you, Dorian.
So it sounds then like, ladies, that it's less so about actual discrimination right now, although there might still be some, but it's more so by the fact that there's almost an expectation that when it comes to all the other household stuff, the woman must do that, which means it therefore takes time away from the workplace. So this sounds like it's a cultural issue. It sounds like, how do we tackle this? Serena, how would we tackle something like this then, if it's not just pure discrimination, but it's a cultural bias or understanding?
Dorian, I think that one of the ways in which we can look at this is really from a legislative perspective. So, you know, policies that government can put in place to assist women and men when it comes to these types of situations. So let me start off firstly, Dorian, by saying that insofar as gender equality legislation is concerned, we really can do more as a country. I'm talking domestic violence, I'm talking sexual harassment, just GBV, just generally as a country, we really can do more. I think when it comes to wage gaps and just issues around salary and some of the disparities insofar as that is concerned, the problem, and you have so correctly pointed it out, the problem is it cannot be perceived, it isn't perceived as pure discrimination. Because were it pure discrimination, there is legislation in place that can tackle that. The problem is that usually in these kinds of situations, there are other factors that need to be taken into account. So women get told, for example, that they don't have the necessary talent, that they don't necessarily have the expertise, that they don't have the experience. And so the salary is equated to some of these other issues, not just gender. So from that perspective, it's a very subtle thing that we are dealing with. Again, what can be done is, we look at, for example, again, the Rwanda example is a really great one from this perspective. What they did in Rwanda in 1994 was to put in place legislation that required at least 30%, and this was constitutionally, so this was actually inserted into their constitution, that at least 30% of all positions at all levels of government had to be held by women. We can equate this obviously to our own BEE legislation. I guess the problem that I have with that is how easy or difficult is it to police it and what penalties are being put in place. And if you look at our situation in South Africa, the problem is there aren't enough policing measures in place, and certainly not enough penalties to ensure that people implement these policies. When it comes to policies around, for example, maternity leave or paternity leave, we can look at the example of Iceland, for example. Iceland has, in fact, put in place policies to, I guess, lessen the gap between men and women when it comes to caring for children. So what they've done is at a very early stage, they implemented firstly a 3-month maternity policy and then a 6-month maternity policy, but they realized at a very early stage that that wasn't going to work because all it was doing was exacerbating this gender gap. So what they then did was to put in place a paternity leave policy. And we have actually done that. So very recently, earlier this year, January, February 2020, we have put in place a parental leave policy, and that includes paternity. But I guess the question then is, has it gone far enough? It allows for 10 days for fathers to take at the birth of their children. Unpaid leave, of course, it's not set out in the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. It is set out in the Labour Laws Amendment Act. But the question then becomes, has it gone far enough? So my personal view on this, Dorian, is yes, we need legislation, of course, but legislation needs to be policed. There must be penalties in place. But I want to go one step further, and I want to say that at the end of the day, how many more pieces of legislation are we going to put in place? How many more pieces of legislation are we going to have in order to simply give us our due? I guess that's really what we're saying. So I guess for me, this comes down to self-government. This comes down to each and every one of us looking at ourselves, looking at our lives, looking at the way we treat people around us, male, female, but looking at it from that perspective to say, in terms of my own self-awareness, what can I do? What positions do I hold where I can make a difference? So yeah, those are just my thoughts, Dorian.
Well, thank you, Zarina. Annie, did you have anything you wanted to add to this topic?
I think just some of the good news around that there is more women actually sitting on boards. And actually we're in the top 5 around the world. South Africa has got 7.8% women chairs, which is actually good news. The JSE actually legislated 2015, they brought about it, and then 2017, they actually looked at it. But there is a reporting on diversity and women representation on boards, which is good news for us. So we're starting to see the trend change. And at one stage, we were fourth in the world in terms of number of women actually sitting in on boards. So I think that is quite good. In South Africa, we also see that we're quite well educated as women. So 60% of bachelor degrees are actually earned by women. It goes a little bit lower down when it's masters 49% and doctoral student 43%. But I think, it's not all doom and gloom. Thankfully, women themselves are actually taking it in their hands to be educated, to get, into those positions. So it just would be great to see that, there is support for that trajectory for women. And I think that's my message of hope to women out there, that if you have that ambition, I think it is possible in this country, provided that you skill yourself adequately, that you get the required skills to do those types of things. So that's my encouragement for the women out there in terms of this.
That is very encouraging, and I'm just reflecting on what the three of you have said, and just, I guess, pausing a little bit with Zarina. And Zarina, you're right. I think legislation's not going to solve this. I mean, we need to make sure that the legislation is fair and it provides opportunities, and it certainly doesn't restrict. But just to use your issue on the Iceland policy, for example, of providing paternal leave for both men and for women. I think one of the big challenges is when I was discussing that, I think in a forum like ours, the number of men that were going, there's no ways I could take paternal leave. My mates would think, what's wrong with you? My fellow colleagues would go, are you serious? Are you actually going to take that? And I think that's probably the biggest problem that we're trying to deal with here, isn't it? Which is, we can put all the laws in place, but if our mindset is not going to change and our heart is not going to change, then we're going to be stuck in this just with a whole lot more laws. And so what we're really looking for is people to say, no, hold on. In order for me to ensure that my wife doesn't fall too far behind in the workplace, if her desire is to keep going there, let me take 3 months off and let me then kind of spend time and be a dad, and carry my share of the role there. And I think that's probably, if we can achieve that in a few more people's hearts, I think this would have been a good series and a good discussion. All right, it's 2042, but we are still going strong here. And we've got one third and final unconscious bias we're going to address before we open up for Q&A. And I'm going to pose this one to Annie for you to kick off. And it's this one. Do women lead differently to men?
So I think I want to start off with a quote. Actually, a lady called April White spoke about the only difference between men and women is everything. And that's what keeps it interesting. So, I think I just want to kind of from personal experience speak about that. I do think that as a woman leader, as a CEO, that I probably do lead differently to a man. And I think there's certain things that come naturally to me. I think from the offset, probably I'm more collaborative, I'm more nurturing in the way that I lead. I do communicate. I'm quite communicative. I think there's a lot of intuition probably in my leadership style. Persistence, I am more flexible, servant-hearted, vulnerable. And I think those are some things that I've been reading a book, Lead Like a Woman, which Yvette actually suggested to us as we were. And just such a stunning book, but also she talks about these different leadership qualities that come very naturally to women, but there may be other things that are not as obvious. And she talks about things like, being decisive, being assertive. Those are things that maybe women might need to work more on. I'm not, there's quite a few chapters in the book, so I'm not going to actually summarize the book for you tonight. But, you know, what she did say in her book was that the top leadership qualities that you find that are well known, documented, women possess all of those top leadership qualities. There is no difference between men and women in terms of those top identified leadership qualities. There's a study that is done every year. I think it's called the Pearson Index or something like that. But so I think there is definitely the ability for women to lead. We spoke about it last week, about that women and men are meant to rule and co-rule, tend the earth, look after it, subdue it, but subdue it in the thing of looking after it. So there definitely is that. I think where there is maybe some differences is I think men are very good at, and I'm going to refer to Mark Grungor, he's done this whole thing about the different ways that men and women think, but I've seen it also in my life is when things personally are challenging, I can take that into the workplace, and I am a bit more prone to taking it into the workplace. Whereas I think men are very good at segmenting, work is work and personal is personal. And, you kind of keeping them in separate boxes. Whereas, Mark talks about that there's like the spaghetti, there's this connection with women and our connections that we make. And I think it tends to be that we connect a lot more things. But it's one of the things that then as women, you have to actually learn is to not take things personally. I loved actually a quote that Hillary Clinton said is that you need to take criticism seriously, but don't take it personally, And I think that that's something that's been one of the biggest learnings for me is that I can't take things personally as a leader and as a woman kind of directing a company. Some of the things that I think women need to be encouraged to do, Sheryl Sandberg talks about it in her book, Lean In, is that women need to know that there is a space at the table for them, a place at the table for them. And perhaps they need to be more confident in speaking up and, kind of giving input, being a bit more, kind of on the front foot in terms of that. And I do certainly think that is something that women in general probably do need to do a lot more is having that confidence, speaking up, recognizing that you have a place at the table. And one of the things that I think we've seen and what I've seen as a woman leader is that it can be sometimes quite disconcerting where you feel other women are actually pulling you down as a woman. So it's not only men that can pull down women in leadership, it actually can be women themselves that are also pulling down. I've had quite a few instances, unfortunately, of women that I lead kind of gossiping, going above my head to someone, who I'm reporting to and thinking there's nothing wrong with that, And I think we need to get over this whole thing of, kind of tall poppy syndrome. We need to support one another. And when we see women leading or doing amazing things, let's celebrate them, let's support one another. And I think a lot of women leaders do speak about that support of, other women supporting women, in these positions. So yeah, those are the things that I just wanted to kind of bring out as leading as a woman. Absolutely, we can lead and we have our different qualities. But I think what I need to also communicate is that you lead from your identity. You lead from who God has made you to be. And that's why it's so vast, is that we all can become better leaders. We all are actually, can grow in this area of leadership. And it's connected with who God has made you to be. So it's to actually really find out what is your purpose, what are your values. I certainly have kind of led from that place of knowing that this is my purpose, being here in this organization, and the mission and the vision that we have is so part and parcel of who I am. And, you know, those things can also shift over time and change over time, and that's also fine. But to be connected to purpose is the strongest position from which to lead, and it's connected to your identity. So it's kind of interesting, because I know I didn't found the Hope Factory, Elizabeth Zambanini, lovely, amazing, phenomenal woman, found it. But it's so incredible. I was given prophetic words around hope, you know, kind of into my leadership, you know, of the Hope Factory. And it was so connected to the purpose as well of what I feel I'm here to do, is to bring the gold out of people, to bring the potential out of people, and to mine for that gold and to nurture them into that. And so, yeah, I think leading from that position of purpose and identity, knowing who you are in God, is the strongest position to lead from. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, you lead from that area of identity and who God's made you to be.
Amen. I'm going to ask Zarina and Yvette to please add their thoughts to this as well.
Thanks, Dorian. I guess what I really want to say around this is I really have been blessed in my life to have worked in a leadership capacity in a private space as a partner in a law firm, you know, in the public sector, obviously, as well, in a leadership capacity, and also to hold a leadership role within ministry. And I guess I want to say this. I want to say that, you know, insofar as the law firm is concerned, I found the environment to be incredibly male-dominated, very decisive, very, very much about results-driven, but also quite a harsh environment because, I mean, a fair number of the partners were male. So it was a difficult environment to succeed in as a woman, to kind of keep up with, because you had to keep up as a man. You had to behave like a man in order to keep up. I guess that's really what I'm saying. You know, in my time as general counsel in a state-owned entity, I obviously, as a C-suite executive, we had to report to the board, and again, extremely difficult because there was a particular board member, female board member, who had sought out a male to hold my position. So when I was appointed, right off the cuff, did not want me in that position as chief legal advisor. So, you know, I encountered issue after issue with this particular board member. And again, when we were up for promotion and they were looking at me for the CEO position, she was the one person who refused. So again, you know, this whole idea of women keeping women back, women not promoting women, and you know, it had nothing to do with whether or not I was capable. It had everything to do with the fact that she had her own ideas. She had preconceived ideas of what she wanted in that role. But I want to commend, you know, going into the ministry space, I really want to commend Carol Gosman. I mean, you all know Pastor Carol at Every Nation Ramsach, but she really is a phenomenal female leader. And, you know, I've worked with her now in a number of different capacities within the church. Incredible person to work for, not just female, incredible person to work for. So I really or to work with, I guess, really want to commend her for that. But I guess finally, I want to say this, Dorian, you know, at this particular point in time, I'm working very closely with two very senior men around a project that may very well turn into something much bigger. And because they're both spirit-filled Christians, can I tell you the difference in the environment that I'm experiencing now versus the law firm environment? You know, working with Christians who share your values, who are equally yoked, it's such a breath of fresh air. So for me, everyone should be born again, Dorian. Everyone should have the same values.
That's why we want to see the kingdom in the marketplace. And it starts with people.
Amen.
Dr. Yvette Solomons, any final thoughts on this particular topic from you?
Yeah. I think Annie hit it right on the head about the identity and the power of purpose. I was a chair of board for the South African Dental Association for 2 terms. And because we were transforming from both a race perspective as well as gender perspective, I experienced an incredible amount of opposition and difficulty. But good for me, as Zarina had said, I had some peer coaching at that particular time, and peer coaching from people of the household of faith, and submitted to the Lordship. And every time I would go back and revert, I realized, oh, wow, this was not about me. It was about what I brought into it. And of course, you can take it seriously, but you should not take it personally. And that is what I came out with it. And literally, results is the thing that speaks. And that should be your focus. Focus is to, in actual fact, be aware of the power of the other, always be. But you must also be aware of that transformative power that can flow from you to them. It is unseen. It is not something that you know about, but you impact them because you are a change agent of environments. You bring righteousness and truth into a situation and uphold righteousness, uphold what is right. As we talk about that relationship, vertical relationship, must be intact. Nothing. You cannot compromise that at any one time. But when Jesus came in, he always spoke life, always spoke truth. And for us, we are going to be expected to be true worshipers. So yes, we do our work. We're going to do it, and the arrows will come, but we will continue to praise. As I love what Kim Walker-Smith, a new album, sings. I don't know if any one of you heard it, on Stones. And she says, I won't let the stones shout out. I will be shouting out. And that's just something that I want to end with. Thank you, Dorian.
Thank you, ladies. I mean, it's just you're inspiring. As I hear you speak, I'm encouraged because, you know, very often in topics like this, you will feel like there'll be an insistence that there is absolutely no difference between men and women, and we know that that's just not true. It's not realistic. But where I'm challenged is this: just because there are possibly, and because there are some universal differences in the way that women lead versus men, one, doesn't apply to every woman and to every man. I know a lot of men that negotiate more poorly than some women that I've negotiated with. So it doesn't apply across the board to everyone, right? Even though maybe there might be kind of a more of an average one way or more of an average the other way. So that's the first thing that I think is important. But the second thing, which is even more important than I'm kind of just walking away with, is this. If I'm going to use the fact that in general, women lead in a certain way or respond in a certain way, if I use that general understanding to negotiate in a specific way with some women, that's wrong. Because I am ignoring the uniqueness of that specific situation. So if a woman who happens to be my boss is upset with me, I've got one of two responses. I can say, I'm going to listen and hear what my boss is telling me, or I'm going to go, it's a woman, she's being emotional, I'm just going to ignore it. Now, all right? Now, the latter may be to my detriment, but let's put that aside for the moment. If I'm always going to jump to the stereotype position, I'm going to ignore the reality of what actually might be taking place in that moment. And I'm going to miss out on certainly what God wants to do there. And I'm going to misinterpret and lose an opportunity to learn and to grow and to develop in that situation. And so we must be so careful not to then just simply go from those stereotypes to a specific situation and interpret everything in light of that. Ladies, we are almost done, but there is one question that I'd like each three of you to respond with, and it's this. The feedback on the group has been, sometimes it is so hard for men to have these discussions with women. And I want to ask you three personally, if there was a man that needed to engage you on something specifically, give us some do's and don'ts, give us some advice as to how you, if there is a man that is leading you, how you would like that man to engage you on certain things, because there seems to be a whole lot of guys out there going, I don't know what to do here. So can you guys help us, please? Annie, why don't we start with you, then Zarina, and we can end up with Yvette.
So I just want to clarify, is it someone that's reporting to a woman saying needing to address something, or is it someone reporting to a man needing to address something?
So the specific context of this question was, and maybe we can pick up on your version at a later stage, but the specific context here was, I'm a man, I lead women, but I feel awkward in how I'm meant to lead these women. I don't want to be too friendly. I don't want to be too harsh. Help me. Help me as a man who leads women to lead them in a godly way.
Well, that question for me is just also such an incredible, yay, we're getting through in terms of like, men saying, I want to lead women better. And so well done for that question. I just want to say, and thank you for that question. I think for me, it's, again, lead from the place of who you are, don't try to be anyone else, because it can also be condescending that you're now trying to, be overly kind or overly sensitive or whatever it is. I think it's that whole thing of just being like, lead from what your identity, and lead from the place where just, if you can just check with what you are saying, is it being received in the way that you are meaning it to be received? So that would be my only advice, is keep curious, keep checking. Are we on the same? Are you hearing what I'm saying, the way that I'm saying it? And I think that would be the way that you could really get through, because that whole adage of people forget what you say, but they won't forget how you made them feel. So, you can check on that. You can actually check on how you're making people feel. So I think that would be my advice to that gentleman.
Thank you, Annie.
Joanne, I would say lead from a place of honesty and lead from a place of integrity, because people can see through you if you're not leading from a place, as Annie said, of being your authentic self. People can see through it when you're lying to them. People can see through it when you're not being completely honest. So honesty and integrity for me would be right up there in terms of how you lead. But I think also, don't make assumptions about the people that you're leading. So don't assume things about me. Rather, let's sit down and have authentic, honest discussions. Communication is key. It's always the most important thing. So lead from that place. For me, those are essential. Honesty, integrity, be your authentic self, and don't ever make assumptions about the people you're leading.
So good.
Dr. Yvette, why don't you wrap it up for us this evening?
Thanks, Dorian. I agree with both Annie and Zarina. My first thing would be to get to know each one of them. Get to know, who are you? And where do you want to go? And how can I assist you? What would you like to go? It's almost like the GROW coaching model, where each one comes in with specific goals. And it's not an issue of just a goal of enough. What do you want? It's like, how is it going to fit into this picture? It's going to be knitted into this fabric. I so appreciate you. Express value, recognition, awareness, and connect with them. The power of connection is invaluable. to know who they are, where they want to go, how can you assist them? And if you have difficulty, I may not be able to assist you, but I'm going to refer you to someone else. And have the watchful eye for those wandering things, those windows opening. Be watchful and discerning about it, because perception is everything. That would be my advice. Thank you, Dr.
Well, ladies, thanks once again for an incredible evening. Thank you for helping us become more aware of blind spots, more aware of these unconscious bias. It's been incredibly valuable. We are committed, and I say we, I speak on behalf of men like me, are committed to learning, to growing, and to doing all we can to walk alongside you to help us deal with this particular issue in our nation, like we're dealing with racism and like we're dealing with the other unconscious bias and areas that need to be reformed. So thank you. Next week, guys, we're going to be back for the third and final part of the series, and we're dealing with sexual harassment in the workplace. And some of these ladies will be back again, and some of the others that were with us before, and maybe some that haven't been on the Marketplace Forum yet. But we're going to be dealing with something that is incredibly difficult and incredibly, it's unfortunately something that still is, to my despair, still something that I've discovered is still so alive, unfortunately, in the workplace. So we're going to deal with this. Guys, God bless you. Have a wonderful week. And we look forward to seeing you back here on the Marketplace Forum next week at 8 p.m. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you, ladies. Bye. Bye, Serena.